Welcome to the Cash Rich Exit podcast. So great to share some time with you. We're recording here in July and it's quite nice and quite warm. Perhaps by the time our listeners are tapping in, you might be wearing a heavier coat and turtleneck sweater instead of t-shirts. But welcome today.
Oh, well, thank you, Colleen, for having me.
Yeah, well, we met as a result of you being on a panel at the Business Transition Forum and me being in the audience and reaching out for a conversation around your expertise in the M&A world. So, give us a little bit of a background of how you got to be doing what you're doing, leading Shaughnessy Group.
Certainly. So my whole career has been initially in technology, and then from that, as I got into more senior executive roles, it evolved into some typical C-suite activities. One of them being M&A. Really enjoyed that part of the business. After a period of time in the technology space, I transitioned or pivoted to Bay Street on corporate commercial finance, which was another area of interest for me. And sort of it evolved from there into leadership roles of various specialty finance businesses in both in Canada and in Europe. And the whole mantra of specialty finance businesses typically to provide financing for businesses, entrepreneurs in areas that the domestic deposit-taking institutions don't play in. Typically higher risk, tolerance, often more complicated type transactions. So after a number of decades in leading various specialty finance companies and financing all sorts of entrepreneurs, after a number of exits, my wife had learned that I'm a failed retiree.
That's a great way of putting it, eh?
She knew I was going to do something else again. And when I took stock at the time, I thought, well, having been a financier to all these entrepreneurs, they've all gotten older. I've gotten older. So initially, the idea was, well, will these baby boomers have the same challenges to exit their business as they did to finance and grow their businesses? So that was the thesis of the idea of it, the genesis of that when we were in Vancouver. And so having a large enough network of contacts, I reached out to accountants, lawyers, and investment bankers. I said, this is what I'm thinking of doing. And particularly what I also observed is that many of these businesses are family-owned, the backbone of the economy, but they aren't the names you see in the newspaper or on the press all the time. These are often very kind of invisible part of where many of your friends and family work, but you've never heard of the business kind of things. These kind of $5 to $50 million companies drive a lot of jobs, drive a lot of it, but they're very much overlooked. And that was validated because, again, if you're in a $100 million business, the Bay Street investment bankers know who you are. They're already sitting in the parking lot waiting to work with you of your business.
Yeah.
And if you're a small business, often commercial realtors / business brokers will list your business for sale. However, if you're somewhere in the middle or in the lower end of the middle or the lower middle market, as we call it in M&A, these are businesses that are I'd say, too small for the attention of the investment bankers.
And too sophisticated for the business broker, right?
Exactly.
Yeah,
Right.
this is your playground, this 5 million to, so you described a 50 million business. Yeah.
So we help owners, navigate that whole process. Two things that are often critical to these families, obviously, realization on the wealth or the sweat equity that the family's invested, but also securing the legacy. What will happen after we sell? Will the brand still be in the community? all these types of things that really makes us different. Is helping you realize on the value that you've created, and then protecting that legacy post-transaction.
And if I'm not mistaken from our previous conversation, there is a bias towards trying to find suitors that are Canadian based and keeping these businesses as Canadian businesses.
Well, yeah, so typically they are Canadian businesses. So the ownership can take many forms. In most cases, they are fellow Canadians. These are not, this is not a big sort of cross-border type trend. These are, often typically cross-border transactions that you hear about, or that, again, need regulatory approval. They're always in the hundreds of millions.
Mm-hmm.
These are, again, like, this will be a business in Peterborough, or a business in Red Deer, Alberta, or a business in, Kamloops, or in, the secondary and tertiary cities. There's not, that make up really the heart of Canada.
So, I guess maybe it might be interesting to share an example of a business that you have supported in making it real, that there's a longevity for the business and that there's a transaction that is also, we call it a cash-rich exit for the owners, for the family.
So absolutely. I think we met at the Business Transition Forum and at the Metro Toronto Convention Center, and we had the opportunity to have ourselves with our client, as well as the buyer of the business and their representative, on a panel, and speak to an audience of business owners who are considering planning for this, their transaction. We advise this family. Company's called Southwest Doors. It's about a $20 million window and door business in London, Ontario. Second generation ownership. Got to a point where they wanted to retire. Their children were too young to succeed them. So they were looking for a transaction that would do two things. Obviously, realize the multi-generational wealth that's trapped in the business, but also promote some key employees to ultimately end up becoming the leaders of the business. So we were looking for both a transition, an ownership, and a succession. And so we worked with them for about 18 months. We developed all the marketing materials. We introduced them to top-tier accountants to get their financials to a state that they would pass muster through such a rigorous process. We brought in proven M&A lawyers to help produce, have a real team around them. Then we, research and developed a very strong, what we call strategic list of buyers and as well financial buyers. And then we ran a very broad auction process, which of course yielded a number of competing bids for the business, which then ultimately that whole tension-filled process creates a higher valuation for them than you would have ever had if you negotiated with a single buyer on your own. So at the Business Transition Forum, we showcased this whole journey, we were able to find a buyer. So part of that process is ultimately where you get to the buyer and seller meet, and they interview each other. Mm-hmm. So it's not just you selling your business, or that it's we try to make this very mutual.
There's a courtship there, in essence.
Yes, and there needs to be in these transactions a cultural alignment, a cultural fit. So we found the buyer who shared their values, and so post-transaction, it's created multi-generational family wealth. All the employees continue to be employed. It's promoted long-term key employee into the president's chair. I believe he actually started with the company when he was 14 years old.
That's incredible.
Yeah. And as you can see on the panel, the relationship between the sellers and the private equity buyer is familial. They get along. They continue to long. We went out for dinner the night before, all of us. So, the husband and wife, Chantal and Chris, who sold the business, brought their parents along. This is a lot. This is not only the husband and wife's, but also the father and mother who invested in this. So it's very emotional. I guess but very satisfying and very rewarding for us as advisors.
And that was bought by a private equity firm, right? And so so often, and I'm probably guilty of it too in some of the material based on conversations here on the Cash Rich Exit podcast, that sometimes the private equity gets a bad shake or a bad name. But that's based on some, very high profile, very specific scenarios that we end up using as the norm, which is really not the norm, right? As far as, we talked about that in sort of the preamble to jumping on here and deciding to record a podcast. So I'd love for you to share your take and your experience of working with private equity to help support these sort of $5 to $50 million business transitions.
Yeah, so I think the role of private equity is effectively they are asset managers. They're managing an asset class, which just happens to be privately owned businesses, not just different from some other asset managers wearing publicly traded securities. They're typically very smart, capable individuals. The expression I always use is that because the media, the press, the television drama, TV, radio, movies, they are always painted as the protagonist, or sorry, the antagonist of the story.
Yes.
Buy
you up, divvy you up, fire everybody, all of those stories, right?
That's the story, right? And I said, well, billionaires don't start out with the goal of becoming millionaires. So these individuals that run these businesses are doing something for their investors, which are often, again, high net worth families, pension funds, endowment funds that need to invest the proceeds for their pensioners, for their students, for their benefactors. And it's simply an asset class that has gotten a lot of press because it is a great way to get an alternative return from things that historically weren't open to them. But their job is to buy businesses, increase their value. It's funny because I was having that very conversation this morning, and then they sell them, and it's almost like that's a bad thing. But it's who they sell it to is often larger private equity funds. So if you think in Canada, there's a couple of sort of billion-dollar private equity funds. The kinds of private equity funds that buy these lower middle market businesses are often much, much smaller, much more entrepreneurial. They may have investments in 8 or 9 other lower middle market type companies. They will grow them to the next stage in their evolution when they require more capital for continued growth. And then often larger private equity funds is who they are sold to. But it's not too different from you and I buying a stock in a public company, and at some point in our investment horizon, we trade out of that stock for another stock. Well, because our asset allocations change, so much has changed. And,
exactly.
Right, and so it's a very similar, but it gets this,
gets this tinge of villain. It gets villainized in essence in many ways, and that's not the case, right?
The number of 2 a.m. telephone conversations with panicking sellers I've had saying, I'm selling to private equity, they're going to fire everybody and close everything. I said, why would they do that? Why would they destroy this? Like they have a profit motive, right? Now, so this is no different than anybody else.
Yeah, exactly.
But they're in this case, there were strategic buyers, right? We had strategic buyers, Canadian strategic buyers. We had other Canadian equity funds. This happened to be a group out of Calgary We had groups out of Quebec. We had groups out of Ontario. We had groups out of British Columbia. Um, so even though they were Canadian, just, the cultural fit and their vision for the business going forward, permitting the succession that they had, just everything, checked all the boxes for this client.
And that's part of your role in the matchmaking process. Is that right? Maybe that's what we could talk about. What is the service that you provide, and a second layer to that would be how does a business owner find you? I mean, certainly if they're listening to this podcast now, they have that opportunity to meet you and learn. But how maybe start there. How have you found that business owners who are looking at that and considering that, how are they finding you?
So, well, I think business owners have a perception of folks like us that our job is to find a buyer. And I wish that's all that we had to do. But most of what we start with is planning and preparation. And even ahead of planning, it's a lot of education. The investment of sponsoring things like Business Transition Forum,
Mm-hmm.
Producing all kinds of articles, working on a book. All of this is education. Because what we have found is that all the things that have made you a successful business operator, and you've grown this business, you've created all sorts of opportunity for other people, you've satisfied your customers, you're meeting your suppliers. None of those things actually get you ready to ultimately sell your business.
Right.
Right. So you need, and again, the type of legal support you had throughout the life of your company typically wasn't an M&A lawyer. The kind of accounting that you did was typically the absolute minimum you needed to do, to the extent whatever the bank required for your loan, whatever the CRA required for you to file your taxes and HST and things like that on time. Mm-hmm. But none of that is to the level of rigor that you're going to be scrutinized. So a lot of this is preparation. The other part of this is ahead of preparing the business, preparing your family around this. We're all Canadians, so we're all about preserving income or taxes. So, one of the big opportunities here is for these families to realize on their lifetime capital gains exemption. So working with a wealth manager, working with tax planners to set it all up properly so that the family can get the absolute maximum and optimize that. You need to start that just on the tax element 2 years in advance. If part of the developing the internal rigor around accounting, management information system, all these things, you just don't pull that out of a hat, in a couple of weeks when you're thinking of selling. This is years of planning.
Yeah, this is not like selling your house, right? This
Right.
is not like selling your house. Although we can make set up analogies with some comparisons. However, the depth and the duration of what's required is quite different. Yeah.
Yeah.
So a lot of your existing clients have found you through your outreach and your effort to provide insight and education over the years.
And I've been fortunate in my career. I've got a pretty large network of wealth managers, lawyers, accountants, all the types of individuals that typically support and advise these business owners already. And so it's not unusual that when the conversation comes up with a management coach or with your wealth manager, or it comes up with your lawyer, or it comes up with your accountant, that we're at an age, the kids aren't interested. We want to explore selling the business.
Mm-hmm.
Well, often that network of trusted advisors is then who introduces us to them.
Right.
Right, because that's really how. And then if they're out looking themselves on doing research, or if they're attending things like Business Transition Forum.
Those are all great ways. Yeah.
Owners who are proactively wanting to learn more about it is typically, it's always a small group that,
mm-hmm.
if they're not curious and what have you, right? But if they are curious and they are wanting to learn, We work with them through that whole process of planning, preparation, the marketing materials, the building the list of potential targets you can go. We'll go on outreach to, and then negotiating all the various stages of the transaction.
Mm-hmm.
Is it can take up to about 2,000 man hours.
Right. Would you say that the a misconception of time is one of those issues that is a common one that comes up for businesses in this segment? And if whether it is or not, what other common misconceptions have you encountered for this cohort of business owners?
The understanding of the time it will take, the scrutiny that the business will be put under,
Mm-hmm.
and the planning that will make all the difference to ultimately the value of the business. The time is probably the time and all the complexities. Um, there's and it depends. People measure it from the moment I want to sell to the moment I sell. That's not really the time.
Mm-hmm.
It's 2-3 years before you want to sell, and then often in these types of businesses, it's not unusual to see structured uh, contingent payments.
Mm-hmm.
So there may be also periods of time that you're, as the owner, you may still stay on, maybe in a board capacity or an advisory capacity. In the case of London, Ontario, they're staying on in advisory capacity 2-3 times a year for board meetings. So I've seen those go up to as long as, like, you could have an earnout, which
Mm-hmm.
can last up to 3 years. You've provided seller financing for 2-3 years. So all of a sudden, I'm from the moment I want to sell to the actual deal, there's the 2 years on the front. There might be another 2-3 years in the back. This journey is a transition journey. It's not the actual deal when it closes, we call a transaction. But through this is a journey.
Yes.
Right.
As is much of life, right?
Yes.
Is a journey, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So, I've often asked the question of my guests, like, when is the right time to start? And I get a common refrain. Let's see if you say the same thing. When is the right time to start?
Well, it's like everything else in life. If you're being asked this question, that's the sign to start. The sign is now. And I, prior, I'm also been involved for a couple of decades in angel investing, and you
Hmm.
meet with startup founders.
Right.
And one of the first conversations I'd have with them is around what's the value of your business, because that's what the investors will care about, and then ultimately what's your exit plan, um, right? And how are you putting things together in such a way that this exit can be effectuated when the time comes,
Yeah.
right? If your financial, some businesses are run as lifestyle businesses that are not transferable. And sadly, 80% of people who ultimately decide to sell their business do not sell in an optimal way because of
Hmm.
lack of preparation, lack of planning, uh, lack of transferability. And that's just a shame. And
It
it's
is
not
it is a
everybody.
shame. It is a shame, right? So, I mean, that's part of what the Cash Rich Exit podcast is about as well, is this thinking about these things from a very intentional lens and format. Not that there's anything wrong in particular about deciding to have a lifestyle business, but if you've actually intentionally decided that that's what you want, right? But if I've met lots of owners who have not really intentionally made that decision. It's just kind of haphazardly turned out to be that way when there could have been, or there could be some processes or changes, methodology that could be input that would make the business more valuable and have more of a over time legacy.
Yeah, your business can provide you with an amazing lifestyle. But that doesn't need to live inside your business. You don't need to be hiring relatives because the relatives. You need to be hiring the most capable, competent people.
Mm-hmm.
You can do the one and not neglect the other. You
Exactly.
can do both, and ultimately, your family will benefit. 60 to 80% of most entrepreneurs' family wealth is tied up in this business.
Mm-hmm.
And come time to exit, this is what's going to create that multi generational wealth. It also what we also know is that as the businesses prepare for this ultimate transition, the business gets better. The quality of everything about the business gets better. The leadership team becomes better. The reporting becomes better. Your bank becomes happier because your timeliness of whomever's you're dealing with.
Yeah.
All the elements in your it's a bit like work-life balance. All these things need to be aligned for you to have the optimum exit.
And you've been putting it, as you mentioned earlier, there's a lot of, we'll call it thought leadership that you've been producing, content that you've been creating to help provide insight, educate, and hopefully support business owners in having their cash rich exit. And I think I heard you allude to your book, in which we've talked about too, and I almost forgot to ask you about it. So you've actually in the midst of an endeavor to put out a book, like one of these things that you might have on your bookshelf. So tell us about that.
So there's a lot to know. There's a lot to learn. And I thought, what I didn't see was there wasn't really a step-by-step guide that helped people maximize value and ultimately secure their legacy. So really, this is just a roadmap that lays out all and breaks down the process into actionable steps from the personal and family preparation to ultimately leveraging tax benefits to the lifetime capital gain. We touched on that. And it'd be packed with real stories, real experiences, right? That entrepreneurs like I think the reason why the business transition forums are so compelling is because you're learning from other people's successes, and you're learning from other people's learnings. And
Oh, I like that phrase. So you're not saying failures, you're saying learnings, right? Because there's something to be gained from every experience.
that's I think that's and then laying out the role of why do I need a wealth manager? Why do I need tax planning? Why do I need to maybe upscale the assurance that in my accounting from compilation to review or audit? Why do I need more than that faithful corporate lawyer that's been with the company for 30 years who effectively does the maintenance on the business versus a tried and proven M&A lawyer? Why do you need intermediaries like ourselves? One of the things that our client brought up is that the people that will buy your business buy businesses for a living. 40, 60 hours a week, they are out buying businesses. You get to do this once in your life. You
Exactly.
will
Yeah.
show up. If you show up on your own, you will show up. You will be underarmed, and you'll be outmanned. And entrepreneurs love learning new things. That's the reason why I think they're also successful.
Hmm.
And I jokingly said to our client in this case, I said, well, after this is done and it's sold, now you're ready to come and help other people. You can come work with us, right? I said, because you need the experience of all of this to, because you just don't know what you don't know. You just, you think the LOI, there's an LOI in front of you,
LOI being letter of intent.
letter of intent,
Hmm.
or it happens quite often. People get a phone call, hey, Colleen, I'm looking at your business, I'm really interested in your business, what are your thoughts? Well, and you engage in the dialogue. Before you know it, there's an LOI in front of you, um, and, and then what do? Well,
Then you get distracted with the shiny object
yeah,
and you forget to run the business because
yeah,
you think it's sold already,
yeah,
and that's the
yeah.
that's the
Yeah,
short story.
you used to get, when the real estate market is very hot, everybody's had someone knock on their door
Hmm.
who purports to be or interested in or have somebody who would like to buy your business house.
Hmm.
And but you're always better to create demand for your, the reason why when anybody who's ever sold their business through an auction process, the data proves that it's 1.25 to 1.5 times more of EBITDA. So on a $3 million EBITDA business, that's an extra $3 to $4 million in value. Um, and if you properly plan for it and you properly invest it, this is a lot of money. All these specialists and advisors more than pay for themselves in the increased value that you create
Yeah.
through such a process. So for a lot of our work is really around educating, letting people understand what their value, what the business is worth today, how
Hmm.
other people may look at the value of their business today. And of course, to earlier do that, then that information can be used over the next 2, 3, 4, 5 years to improve your business. Um,
Yeah, so not just necessarily about increasing the value upon sale, but a lot of this work can also go to just generally creating a more profitable, sustainable business in general.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
More, create more employment, all sorts of benefits in the local community that
Hmm.
comes through. Like a good example is if you're going to run a marathon,
Hmm.
you don't just show up, right? You have put in the miles. If you,
Guaranteed, as someone who's trained and run a couple of marathons, you wouldn't just show up at the start line.
right,
Yeah.
right, and there's a ton. If you're going to run a half marathon, my wife was a half marathon runner.
Mhm.
The hours of commitment and dedication and the weeks and months leading up to it, and the strength training and all sorts of other things that you may not directly attribute to running that need to be done.
Mhm.
Uh,
Nutrition,
Nutrition,
sleep,
yeah,
all of
and
those
strength
things.
training. I
Hmm.
mean, and it's no
I love
different.
the analogy, Carl. It
Yeah,
works with me for sure.
good.
Do you have a publication date in mind
We're
yet?
hoping in the fall.
Fall. Okay, so possibly by the time we're going live, and if that's the
Yeah,
case, when we are sharing that the episode is live, if the book is live, we'll want to
yeah.
make sure that we share that resource. How do the Self-Made Nation, the listeners here, how do they get in touch with you?
Simply look for Shaughnessy Group on the internet, shaughnessy.group, or look for myself on LinkedIn. And yeah, that's probably the easiest way to do it. Uh, and again, all of our love having conversations. Earlier, the better. Exploratory. It's completely. We do a lot of these no obligation, complimentary conversations. Uh, One of the first things we'll often do is we will do a complimentary valuation. We will, which is an eye opener for a lot of business owners, and that you've had situations where they go, well, this is not enough. I can't sell my business yet. That's okay. Now you know what you need to do. So in 3, 5 years, you're in a better spot.
Hmm. Exactly. Well, one of the things that we like to do as we wrap up these types of conversations, which I'm sure we could just keep talking and going forward, it's a good idea to wrap them up and leave people wanting more. What would be, in your mind, a succinct piece of fun, frank advice to leave with the self-made nation, the CEO, founder, business owner?
I think, and this is kind of, do not fall in love with your business.
Hmm.
It serves a purpose. It has a utility. It's a tool. It's not your identity. Treat it like a prized, let's say, vintage car or something like that. You polish it, you maintain it, take it out on nice days, maybe take it. But when it is time to sell, you wanted to sell it to someone who's going to be treating it as well as you did. You'll be happier when that time comes if you've prepared and done all of this. So whether it's sipping on margaritas on the beach or starting the next venture, knowing you've unlocked your company's value and honored its legacy. Right?
Oh, I like it. That's a good one, Carl. Thanks so much for being with us today.
Thank you. Take care. Bye-bye.